Hey, Paul. Hey, Paul, do you hear me?
I can't hear you, man. Are you muted?
I'm talking right now. Huh.
Can you hear me? Okay. Let me see. Why can't I hear you?
Do you hear me?
Say something again.
Do you hear me now?
Oh, shoot, yeah. It was something on my end. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I sent you this is the link from same as the one I sent you yesterday.
Yeah.
But like, you can see my screen, right? Okay. So hopefully I have everything correct here. Oh, what happened?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just using a new computer, but I finally have like the week 2 FAQs. Did you get a chance to look at some questions?
Yeah, there aren't actually a lot on Piazza.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, but I did kind of make my own notebook, just kind of going over.
Oh, okay. Did you want to share that one?
Yeah, I mean, oh, like with you mean, or?
Or like today and during our.
Yeah.
You can do
I think I
that.
can start with that like first thing when people come in, because it's
Okay.
like pretty brief. And then it's mostly just like tips and tricks, sort of, not
Good.
like an
Okay.
overview of like
Yeah.
how to do this and that. Because I think
That's good.
your what is it, PDF files that you sent me yesterday has pretty good like examples, anyways.
Yeah, it was I think she wanted us to. Were you there on Monday? I don't know what happened on Monday, but
Yeah,
or
no, I
so
wasn't there on Monday.
okay, but like we're supposed to go over like I guess this is gonna be how it works now. We're gonna split it like the coding labs. So I guess it's more streamlined. I don't have to talk about everything.
Mm-hmm.
But like I guess we'll talk about the 4, 5, 6 today, and then the demo is kind of just an extra stuff. I'll probably just
Yeah.
give an overview and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the mic, and then you can give it back to me
Mm-hmm.
for the demo. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I guess we'll just start with my like my part and then give you the mic after for the demo slash like the video.
Okay.
And I guess while you're showing the video, we can have the students join in.
Oh, for today, I'm probably not gonna do a video.
Oh, okay,
I'm,
okay.
I'm just gonna go over the same thing because this one I did more like lines like of like
I see.
text.
Okay,
So I'll just redo it. It's the same one, but I'll just redo it. I remember what I did.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess while you're doing that, if students have like individual questions, I'll just have them join the breakout room.
Okay. Yeah, you just ask them about that. Like you'll do the FAQs and then just ask them first, and
Yeah.
we can let them
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah, that's fine, Taylor.
Okay.
Hey guys, we're gonna begin in maybe 3 minutes. We'll just let people filter in first.
Hi, I tried to click your link that you put in the chat and it said I need access.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys access after. It's a Google Drive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just click it. It should prompt me. I'll give you access. Okay, I guess we can begin because this week's gonna be a little bit long. But anyways, hello guys. This is your second week, COGS 18 Coding Lab 2. And just to introduce ourselves again, because we have a second TA or IA. So I'm Paul, and then Taylor is going to be helping us. And our emails are here. You can either, for questions for later purposes, you can either email us or ask it directly in Piazza. But just to give you guys our office hours, Taylor has his on Mondays. Maybe you guys been there already. And then mine's is on Wednesdays, 6 to 7. Mainly because if you guys would like more help with your coding labs before it's due, I'm there at 6. And for today, we'll start off with week 2 FAQs from Piazza. Taylor's gonna do that in a bit, but I'll just go over the logistics first. So for today, your coding lab 2 is due before midnight. And then your assignment 2 is due on Monday next week before midnight. And then I believe you guys will have your first exam soon, and that's going to be administered on Monday. And then for today, mainly, we're going to be talking about collections, while loops, and for loops. If you guys do have questions about parts 1 to 3, other stuff in your coding lab, feel free to give us some questions on that. I know that was covered by the other TA on Monday. But today, I'll mainly be talking about parts 4 to 6. So anyways, without further ado, Taylor, you want to take the stand?
Yeah, can you stop sharing your screen and I'll share mine?
Okay.
Or you already did that. Nice. Okay. All right. Let me zoom in. Is that big for you guys?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna go over like the basics and like kind of tips and tricks for this coding lab. And then so to define a list, you use a parentheses in the end, in the start. And then this is the list. And then for tuple, you use the brackets instead of the parentheses for list. And then the main difference between the list and tuple is that tuple, you cannot modify the elements in the tuple. And then for Python, the index class are 0. So don't forget that when you're doing the coding lab. Like, so if you want to print the first element of the list, you got to use the number 0 instead of 1. And then this little quotation marks will just print a line. And so see, if I do list of 0, San Diego, since San Diego is the first item in the list, that it prints that. And same for the tuple. Same there. And there are some questions about printing every element. Like say like you want to print every second element in the list. The trick here is to follow this guideline for printing the items. Let me just uncomment this. So as you can see on here in the bottom, I want to print everything in the list, but every second element. So what I did was I start at 0, and end. If you leave it blank, it just automatically knows it's the end, the whole list. And the step is 2. So what you see here is that I printed every second element in the list. So that's San Diego, skip Carlsbad, Irvine, and skip, and then San Francisco. Oh, and then this is like a personal preference when you code, but when you add one number, like a number to a same variable, you can do this, obviously, but you can also do this, plus equals 1. And then so Python knows that you're just adding 1 to the same variable defined before. Isn't tuple define use parentheses? No, so that's for list, as seen up here.
So on the lecture, I think it's 6th lecture, it says like tuple use parentheses.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it does, but like it defaults it. You could use either one. It defaults it right here. It is, yeah. Like you use like if you look at how it's defined that way, but then once it's
like this, you mean?
Yeah.
Or no, or I'm not sure if that.
Yeah, the tuple,
Yeah.
you can use the parentheses, yeah.
Yeah, but I guess like the main thing is to use the brackets for tuple. All right, so yeah, so that's the kind of general overview / tips. And I'll hand over to Paul now to go over the other stuff for coding lab.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just to jump off that, I'm gonna be talking about kind of similarly, but if you guys actually before we do that, let me just go over like what you guys will be doing today. So this is coding lab 2, and if you guys already started, these are parts 1, variables. Parts 2, you're gonna be doing operators and comparisons. We kind of talked about this last time, and then the part 3 asserts. I think on Monday this was talked about. If you have questions, let me know. I answered some questions on these last week, but mainly for our part today, I'll be talking about collections, what they are, different ones, how you index them, and also one thing to note: there are these challenge questions. We want you guys to play around with the basics first, but make sure you go over these very carefully and answer what it asks. And then for part 5, we're doing conditionals. We kind of touched on this, but then now you can actually nest these. I'll talk about that in a bit. And then last part is loops, probably the most difficult part. If you guys have done loops before in coding, they're not as bad, but it's just the logic of where you put things, especially for while loops. So okay, without further ado, let's take a look at what collections are. So for collections, I would say, oh yeah, before that, if you guys do have questions, you can actually not listen to this because I might take up the whole lab time. You can either verbally interrupt me, or you can text us or PM us. Taylor should be able to give you guys answers to those, or if you want, we can give you a breakout room. So just let us know how you want it done. But anyways, for collections, there are 4 types. So a list is one of them, and then Taylor talked about this already. Mainly the one thing that you guys will be using most is like lists and tuples. And what these are, like when I'm talking about collections, is just you can have like an array of like strings or like numbers. It could be integers or floats. But these are just different ways of defining an array. But like what we would like you guys to really be aware of is how they are used and when to use one versus the other. So first of all, a list is defined. I mean, yeah, this can get really interchangeably. Like you can probably use like parentheses, but the convention really is to use brackets when you're using a list. And when
Excuse me?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I haven't been approved to view the Google Drive, so.
Oh, that's fine. I'm gonna send you guys this in the beginning, but please just wait till the end. Once you click that, I'll give you guys access after lab.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Yep. But like, yeah, this Google link is just everything I'm gonna talk about here. But I think it's good because then at least you guys can open it on your own time. So for a list, when you would use that is because, or why you would use it is because it can be modified. Like, you can edit it, you can index or cut it, like, and then it can also be duplicated. Like objects within a list, you can have like 2 strings of the same name, or like you can have a number of the same name. And it can also be indexed. This I'll talk about in a bit, what that means. And it's unsorted. So what that means is like when you define it, it doesn't automatically sort it. It's gonna, how it outputs the displayed like array of how you define it is exactly the same as how you defined it. And then it's best used if you're editing the collection. And then the second one is like a tuple. So tuples typically use like these parentheses to define it. And why sometimes you may not use it is you can't modify anything in a tuple, but it can be duplicated. So you have same objects inside. It could also be indexed, and it's also unsorted. Why you would use a tuple rather than a list is for efficiency. Sometimes like when you're modifying like an array, it takes more memory, and you can see most of these are going to be that why you would use like one collection versus the other. And then the third one, I don't know if this was covered in class, but like there's a set as well. So a set is a collection where you define it with like curly braces. Some of the characteristics of it is that you can modify it as well. You can't duplicate anything there. You can't index anything. And then, so this is the first one. So if you're defining a set, it automatically sorts your elements inside. So like if you did like 2, 1, 3, and then what outputs is 1, 2, 3, it sorts it for you. So it's used best if editing collections. So like, because you can edit and modify it. And then this is also good for efficiency. And then the last one, you guys did cover this, but I'm just gonna define it here. We're not gonna play around with it. This is probably one of the more difficult ones, but the last type of collection is a dictionary. And it's also defined with a curly brace. It can be modified. You cannot duplicate anything inside. It can be indexed, and then it's automatically sorts your elements. And why you use a dictionary is it's best if you're editing the collection, and if you want it to have less memory, and then the ability to index. So that's very important. So the method that lists, when you're trying to, if you guys have used coding before, like MATLAB, all those other programs, you typically use like 1 as your first index. But then for Python, we're using 0. So this is going to become very important because the first element is not 1, it's 0. And then just some code syntax. So I'm going to talk about these in the examples. So let's just go over that. So the first example here is just defining what a list is. So like, for example, this one, you could either like define a list by using these curly the brackets, or this command called list, which is kind of double. Like I would just use this instead of this. And then another way would be if you were to use like, I'm just gonna show you different examples of a list. You know, you could put in integers here. And then the other one would be like, you could put floats. You could also define strings. So yeah, a list is defined with brackets, I believe. And then tuples is with these. I believe that was in lecture. Unless it's different. But that's what I know it as. And then you could also use you know, you could also define like Booleans. You guys know these, true or false, or like a non-data type. You know, you can mix up all your different objects inside. It's just a way to like group different things, so you can modify it for your code. And then here's a tuple. Just so that you guys will, you know, like know what these are. A way to check if you actually have a tuple is like if you do this here. So like I defined this, right? This is my variable, and then I defined these like elements inside my array of which is a tuple. And then when you check what that is, so you use type, it tells you what it is. So if I change this to like a bracket, if you change it to a bracket, it tells you it's a list. Okay, and then here's another collection, a dictionary. Just one thing with dictionaries is if you let me see what, oh, that's is you wanna be able to know like what the elements are in here. So everything on the, so how you define this is first you have these curly braces, and then what you have here is like a colon for each element. And what you want to know here is what goes on the left or the right of the colon. So on the left here is what we call the key, and on the right of the colon is called the value. So like the way you index these, you'll see is if you index like an apple, you're actually going to get the value. So you'll see this later on. But yeah, just remember like the left of the colon is like the key and then the value, and this is how you define it. And then different ways of like playing with your collections is, so here you have like a collection of fruits, and then you could actually use like the length of this array. And sometimes you guys seen this last time is you could use this number to compare. So what I want you guys to know here is how to use the len function, and then so what goes inside is a list, and then what outputs here is like the integer, and then it is the length of the list. And then the next here is we're going to be using element. Just the couple examples here are just different ways of like modifying your lists. And yes, you could use these with all the other collections as well that you can modify. But it's very helpful to know like what you can do. So one of those is so you can do an element. So, and what that is when you index something inside inside your collection, you can output like if you put in a number here. And this is how it works. So you define this list, and then you put in the list variable, and then these brackets, and what goes inside the brackets is the index number. And that's why it's very important, like what number you're using, so that's how you index. And like, each element here. So what you would do is like, if you wanted to return like the first element, like I said, you use 0. And this is what outputs. Like you go here, and then the first element is the apple. And then if you wanted to get, and you want to be careful here, is like if you want to get the third element, so you always start from 0, right? 0, 1, 2. So it's always like a bookkeeping thing. So you have like 0, 1, 2, the third element is actually 2 here, and it's mango. And then like another thing is like, what if you want to get the last element? And then you don't want to, like, this list is really short right now, but what if it's like really long? Then like one way, yeah, you would count the number of elements, but the really easy way is just doing this negative. You could do it negative and then 1. So this indexing will just give you the last element or of your list. And then you want to be careful, like you're going to get this error. Like, if you don't know the length of your list and then you just pop like a number here that doesn't exist, you're going to get an index error. And then another way to modify your list is to use slicing. So slicing is like, you only want to access like a different portion of your list. You don't want to have like the full length or every element all throughout the length of your list. So this is a good way to do that. And the syntax for that is you define this list variable. It's kind of similar to how you did the element, like modification. So how you do that is you put these brackets, and then within the bracket, you put in like how you're, like the range of where you want to access, like okay. So like a few examples for that is, what if you want to go from beginning to end? So what you can do is you don't really need to put any numbers here. If you just like, because what goes in the first is where you want to begin, and the second is where you want to end, and then the last is like where you want to your increment. So if you want to go from beginning to end, you just put no number and then colon, and then this you just define your step, which is like go to each one, but then reverse the order. So you want to be careful. Like sometimes when I guess an assignment can ask you, I want to reverse the order of the list. Like, yeah, like how do you do that? Like there's different ways. This is only one of them. But like, yeah, like the more, I would suggest like maybe experiment on what you could do. And then so like the wording, sometimes it will tell you how to do it, but then, like if you just don't know how to reverse it, then this is one way. But yeah, just don't get tricked by the wording. And so this one is another way. You could return every item between the second to last of the list. And then another way is defining, you could play around with, like, so you start from the second, 1, 2, so 0, 1, 2 here. And then you go every third. So this, 1, 2, 3. So mango and melon. So like, yeah, like see what it does first. And then once you get a hang of like how these numberings work, the syntax, then you can technically like anticipate before you even code it, like what you want it to, like what to do. And another thing is like appending. You guys will learn this. This is kind of, because we have commands, like these, and then we also have a different way. It's called method. So this is kind of like a method where you put this dot and then a type of command. So what this appending does to your list is it will add a new data. So like, for example, here. So my original list is this. What we have. And then I want to add strawberry, like somewhere. So you just do this. You use list, like variable, and then dot append, and then whatever you want to add at the end. And then you also have membership. And then so membership, what this does is like, you want to check if something is inside your list. And it just checks, it gives you a Boolean, true or false. Is cherry inside your list? And it's not, so it's false. Of course, you could put in not, and it'll give you true. And then another thing is indexing. So If you remember, I talked about element. So it's kind of like, it's just a word terminology difference. Like if you're talking about like putting a number here, and then you want to access like the actual element, then it's called elementing. But if you're gonna put in like the actual element and you want to know what index number it is, it's called indexing. So for example, here is the same list. And then what this returns is not a string. It returns this index like number or integer. And then how you do that is kind of similar to what we did up top. But like you put the variable and then dot index and then whatever like element you want to know, okay, what index number is that? So let's check 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's correct. And then here's another one, replacing. So like if you remember, I did this appending and I added like an element inside my my array, but then that added it to like the end of it. Like what if I wanted to add it like anywhere in between any of these? You could use replacing. So same list, and then what if you wanted it between like, you know, this index 0, 1, 2, 3. I think it's gonna go in between here. Let's just check. So I did like, it goes between mango, or no, it replaces. There's another one actually. So what this does is it's gonna replace the banana as strawberry because I put it in this right here. And then you can also sort it. Another way is like, you know, if you want, there's actually, yeah, we'll talk about it in a bit. But when you want to sort your variables, like, you know, numbers, for example, like this is what I had, right? And then I want to sort it in. So you just put dot sort, and it'll give it to you in, you know, from negative to positive. And then you can also do, like I said, you could use indexing or elementing to reverse your list. But a way that you could do that is like doing this, or let me see, or doing this. So you define your variable, right? And then you sorted it, and then you dot reverse. So this does the same thing as if you were to do like this. Is what you know, I mean, it's not as clear what you're doing here, but like if you do like dot sort and dot reverse, and you sorted it first and then you reversed it. So it's intuitive, but yeah, either way works if you want to reverse your list, either using sort reverse or this : -1. And then another thing you can do is you can also insert something. This is what I was talking about. You can insert it and not replace it. But yeah, it's whatever you think it would do. You're gonna insert strawberry in the third element, so between mango and banana. So yeah, it's pretty nifty. You could do a lot of things, and you can also extend. And I think what this does is you're gonna combine lists, you know, one list and then another list. So what you would do here is like, you know, you define the first one, and you dot extend, and then you know, whatever you want to add to this first one, you put inside here the parentheses. So let's check what it does. So you have the first one here, and then at the end it adds this. So whatever you have beforehand is what you're gonna add it to, and then whatever you put in the extend is gonna add it to it. And then you could also remove things, removing by index. And how you do that is like using that pop. So what if I wanted to remove the fourth element? I would just do the variable list and then dot pop and then whatever index number you want to remove. And that's what you have. And then you could also remove by elementing. Kind of similarly, so you know what you want to remove, not the number, the index number. So you just put it here, but then you put dot remove. So it removes whatever this string is here, or whatever object you have. And then you can also, obviously you could delete. So deleting is kind of similar to these other ones. You have a variable list, and the syntax for that is you put del, and then you have the list that you have, and then you do like this indexing or elementing. So you delete the third, or 0, 1, 2, 3, third, or the fourth element. So it removes banana. And then you could also do like clearing. So what this does is it clears your entire list that you define. Sometimes you wonder like why do you need this? Sometimes like when you're doing like a loop and maybe you want to update your list, you get what you have and then you assign it to a different variable and then you empty it. So there's different purposes for this. And then if you guys have worked with vectors or matrices before, this is actually one of the ways that you can define a matrix. So you define a list, but then how you define it is, so you have a list within a list. So that's why it's a nest. The list is you have this list, and which is their first row, and then you have the second row and third. And so you're gonna see that's how you define it here. So this is how you define like a matrix. But there's I guess if you want to index like a matrix, what you could do is like if you know like the row and the column, you do it this way. So the first number here in the brackets is the row and the second is the column. And if you wanted to just get the whole entire row, is you just put 1 and it gives you the first row. Okay, so that's everything about collections. And now let's talk about loops. So the first loop you guys will encounter is a while loop. And just to briefly talk about this, so a while loop is like, why you use it is if you have a repeating code where you have some condition that you want to comply, like if it's true or, and then what this does is it repeats the code when the condition is true until it becomes false. So that here, I'll show you what that means really. So what you have here is kind of like a flow chart, a code flow chart. So there's a while loop, and then you're gonna execute this while loop if your condition is true. And it checks is it true, and it does, it goes inside the while loop. And it loops here until you ask this question again, and then is this condition true? And if you say false, then it exits out the loop. So let's see, like for your while loops, you want to be careful because sometimes if you don't check your syntax, well, it'll run, but like there's different. If you don't put you're gonna encounter this what you call an infinite loop, and then you'll see that this is happening. Is if you have like when you have this like number like in your code, and then when you run your while loop, it stays as an asterisk. There's no number here. And then there's other things that indicates it, but if you know something's wrong and there's an asterisk here, just go to kernel and then interrupt and then redo or edit your code and redo it. But this always happens, so make sure you know how to stop that. Like don't continue until you do the kernel interrupt. Or you could do this other thing to stop, square, or control, or press Control C. And then for conditions, within a while loop, you can put a comparison, it could be a Boolean or like a membership operator. And then we'll talk about this in a bit. And you can also use continue or break commands. And you could nest your while loops. And then one thing, if you're used to other types of code syntax, when you're doing like any type of loop, you want to add the colon. Like here, for example, here's how you do the syntax. So you have you have this initial count, and then you have the while loop, and then this is the true condition. And then don't forget there's a colon in the while loop, and then also the for loop. And everything after that is your block of while or for loop. And then this last thing right here is make sure you align your commands. So what I usually do, the reason why you do this is sometimes if you align it to like incorrectly, it won't run what's in your loop, or you're gonna get an error. But what I usually do is I align my block of code here after the while command or keyword. I just align it to like the condition. So that, that's like one way to check myself. And then here's the examples. So the first one here, so how you usually define a while loop is you put like a counter. We call it a counter. It's just the initial number that's gonna make, that you wanna start with, because your loop's gonna increase that number, that's why. And you wanna start with a number. and then keep on increasing that number within your loop after you perform the command. And so for example, you have this count 1, right? And then this while loop's gonna check if your count is less than 5 or up to 5. And then if it is true, then it's gonna run this print statement. And then once that happens, it's gonna increase this count. And now it's 2, and then it checks, and then this will keep on running until this is like 6. So you'll see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 is false, so it doesn't print it. And then you could also go the other way. Like you start with 5, and then you do this comparison. And then, so what you want to know here is like defining the counter, knowing the condition, and then make sure you're increasing the count, or you decreasing it, changing the count. So here, that's the 3 different elements. And then you can also use while loops to add a range of numbers. So what you're going to see in a couple is like just different ways of using a while loop. So you're going to add a range of numbers from 1 to 10. I'm just going to hurry up in a bit because we still have to cover 4 loops. But anyways, so you have the sum result, and then you have the initial number, and then the final number here. And then you have the while loop. It checks if your initial number is less than or equal to final number. And then what I'm trying to perform here really is just adding this range of numbers. Sometimes like you want to say, oh, how do you just know what to do in a loop? You don't really. You have to like test it. So maybe start off with like not 10, maybe like 2 or 3, something small, and then test that loop and make sure you print something. And then once that confirms your result, like what you want to get, then you can always, you can increase that number, because then, it's going to take a long time to load. And then here, what I'm trying to do here is I'm doing a while loop with continue command and then a conditional. So the conditional statement and then a continue. So what happens here is when you use continue so it does this count, right? And then you're minusing 2 every time. And once I have, like, if the count here, condition here is 2, I don't print anything. It just goes to the next one. So that's what happens with continue. So you did 8, right? 10, and you minus, and then 8, 6, 4, and then you reach 2. You're not gonna print this. It's gonna continue to the 0. So it just skips it. Continue is like skipping it. And then a break, what does a break command do with a conditional? So it's kind of similar. The one difference is it doesn't continue, right? It breaks. So you did 8, and then 6 and 4. It doesn't continue to the next, like, until this is false. It just breaks once you reach 2. So you don't print the count. It goes to 4, and then once you reach 2, you're done. It exits out of the while loop. And then this next one here is using break with a Boolean condition. So like I said, this can be a comparison, or it could just be a Boolean. So you put in like a true, or like, it has to be true, like, because when you say while, it's this true means like run this if this is true. It's kind of just like a default. It'll run it because it's true. And then once you reach this, it's going to continuously run because it's never going to be false until you say, like, you reach this. So it breaks. And then you also have this while loop with else conditionals. It's kind of similar. So like, you know how like you have if statements with else and else if? You could actually do an else with a while else. So it's kind of like a while else loop. What this does is, like, here, I'll show you, so you start with, a number, you do the whole while command, but then you can just end this. You don't have to print anything, but like, what if after you're done, you want to do something else? So this is what else does, is after you're done, you could do whatever you need here. So it's kind of just like the next command. And then while loop with repeated strings. So you can combine, you've learned already how to print like different things. So you can concatenate, or like, a variable that you define, which is this count. and then you concatenate that with like a string. And there's like different ways you can play around with this. Like later on, you're gonna see, I think it's called like a chatbot. These are the different ways of like creating sentences, like combinations of them. And then while you're not defining that, the greatest thing about these loops is if you know there's a pattern, don't define them as like an exact print statement each time. You could just do the loop, but you need to know what the pattern is. And then you can also do a while loop with like a membership operator. So you define this list variable. And then I want to know, okay, like is cat, like I want this to be true, right, to run. So is cat in the variable that I defined? So it seems like it is, right? So, and then so I do, and then what I want to do here, I'll run it. I want to remove cat. So I remove it, but then now it's not in it. So what happens is it's only gonna run that. One thing I wanna show you guys is like here. So you know how like I was talking about aligning things? So it really works well, like for example, in print statements. Because like depending on where I align something, like I aligned it here and then now I aligned it here, you get a different output. But like what the difference here is like if you put it here, you're just gonna get your last, like after you run your while loop, you're gonna get your last statement. But sometimes what helps me, you know, if you're trying to debug something, is you wanna print like every time you're running this loop, you wanna print what happens so that you can edit it. And then here's this another while loop with a list with no condition. And what I'm trying to do here is I wanna remove everything from each element from this like while loop, from this list. And I'm using a while loop to do that. Okay, I'll answer that in a bit. That's really weird. Show me that after. Okay, so what we're doing here is so you have this, and you guys know how to modify lists now. What I'm trying to do here, you could put whatever you want, but like I just want to remove each one, and one logical way of doing that is this one. So like you see here, if I didn't know what's going on, I could just do that. So that's really the ending. And if I want to know what's happening each time, you can do that. And then like fun things you could do is like you can actually, you know, like create these different geometric patterns. I believe some of these will be, you guys are gonna have this in your assignment later on. But like, just play around with it. Like it's just knowing like what you're incrementing, you know, Y and then X. And then, you know, you can always change whatever pattern you have. And then, some of these, what's gonna be difficult is figuring out like this statement, like why would you put a print statement and then an and here? Yeah, so if you have any questions on these, like just let me know. But yeah, there's certain like syntax, like it has to be in the same or in the correct order for this to output. But there's different ways of doing this though. This isn't the only way. And then here's another fun one. Yeah. Okay. One other way that you could use a while loop is you could actually ask the user, like yourself or someone else, an input. And then, you know, like for example, if you guys, I mean, everyone knows this, like when they're logging on to something, like a username, and you put in like a wrong password. This is technically what it's doing, is like it's checking if your password, you're using the loop, and it's checking if your password is correct. And if it is, then it's good. And then so here, I'll just write my name. You want a name? Yeah, sure. So and then, you know, you could always do this. So, okay. So yeah, it does that different ways. So like you'll learn chatbots later on. And this is what is literally is doing the same exact thing. Is you give it a response and then you're using like a loop and a bunch of statements so that and then it talks back to you magically. And so let's talk about the last thing, in the last 10 minutes that I have. So for for loops, kind of similar, and I'm not gonna go over it's kind of similar to the while loop, but like here, you know, the for loop, the one thing that's different here is like you can actually define this this condition. You'll see what I mean. It's not just like, is it true, but then the number of times that you're running the loop. But in the while loop, it's every time it's true, and then once it's false, it exits. Here is after you reach a sequence, it exits. So you use this last item, you know, you go through every item of the sequence, and then, and if it's not the last, it'll execute your for loop, and then if it is the last, then it'll exit your loop. Okay, so here's just some few examples how you use a for loop. So, you know, the syntax for it is like you have this for, and then this counter, kind of similar, but then now it's inside. It's not like outside your loop, like, and then so it's inside your for loop statement here, and then so you count, and what's happening here, and then you put this in, and then this is your how you define the sequence or like the range. So this range is how you're defining that sequence of numbers that you're gonna increment. So if you haven't seen range before, how it works is you have three different elements here, three different arguments. The first one is your start, and then the second is your stop, and then this is how the third is the step, you know, how you're incrementing it. So what you're technically doing in a for loop is, so you have this count, you start with the first in the sequence, and then it runs it. So now it's 10, right? And then you minus 2, now it's 8. So you print it, now it's 8. And then it goes and so on and so forth until you get to like the last part, which is like 2. And then so you have that, and then it's done. So now it's simpler. And then the one thing with the for loop is you don't really get an infinite loop. So if I were to choose which one to do, I would, you know, if you're gonna do this for forever, is use a for loop. There's certain ways why you would use a while loop, but it's just more prone to that, like the infinite loop I was talking about. This one you have more control to, you know, number of times you're gonna run it. And then this is a for loop that prints a range of numbers horizontally. And then you could also do, you know, strings. Kind of similar, so you just do a range of 5. You want to run it 5 times, just put range 5, and then it repeats it 5 times. And then you want to do it like horizontally. This is how you do it. This is a syntax for it. And then like, what if you wanted to? Oh yeah, this is a way for you, the same way as how you index like an array or like a collection. You could do it for a range. So you know what the range gives you. Like a range gives you, like a number from 0 to 4. And then you want to access like the first element of that list, or like the range. You just do bracket, and then 0, and gives you this. Or if you want like the third element is 3, you know, similarly to how you index like a list. And then you can also do this. I mean, here's another way of defining a list. Instead of like using the brackets, is list and then put in a range. You know, you define your actual numbers. But this is only for like numbers. And then you can print strings, you know, you can concatenate. This is a way of doing it. And then you could also do like, kind of like a table. So you could do this. So there's different syntax for it. Here's one of them, 2 columns. And then like, you could even combine it with like a condition. So you have the count and then this range again from. So, and you know how this works now. But then, so you can, pretty much everything you learn about conditionals, you can put inside a for loop and a while loop. And then you can also, you know, similarly to like a while loop, you can print numbers using a certain range. How you would do that is just start with a number, initial number, and then whatever number you want to print. And then, you know, you want to increase that number result by the count that you have. So play around with it again. Try to like edit, modify your list and then check what you have in each one and see if that confirms with your result. And then you could use continue and breaks. You've already learned, this skips number 6. So like it does this 1 to 10. And then if you reach 6, it skips it, it goes to like 7, yeah. And then you can also use break. So same thing, 1 to 10, reach 6, it breaks, and you're done. 1 to 5 only. And here's like a way, like what I was talking about, like a password. And if you put in like a wrong password, you can control like what outputs. And then see, this is asking me again what my password is. So it does that until I guessed it right, or you finally log on. And then here's another one, like so you can define this variable, like string variable, and then instead of numbers, I can print each individual letter. So neat stuff. And if I wanted to like only print out a few letters, this is how you do it. Yeah, there's another lab starting at 2. It's exactly the same one though, but you can sit in if you want. And so this is another one. And then so you have this for like if you want to print everything in like, instead of using a range, you want to print everything in like a list. You could definitely do that. So everything here is just pretty much a sequence of numbers or like objects. So all the collections that you learn, put it in here. Whatever goes on the left is like what you're putting it into, the variable, the counter. It does every element here. It puts it in count and it prints it. So same with this. You can concatenate different things. So if I'm going too quickly, I'm giving you guys this if you access the link I sent you. And then if you have any follow-up questions, just let us know. So here, I'm just using continue again. There's different examples. It's always good to like show you guys like different ways of how things work. And you could even like, if you wanted to like a for loop to multiply numbers within a list, you could do that. Like, if you wanted to like times every element within like a range from 1 to 10, times it by 2, you could do that. Like what's happening here. And then you can also do, this will be, I think some of your assignments will have this, is within a list, if you wanted to like create a list, and then from that list, I want to define an empty list, right? And then what I want to put in this empty list is everything that is divisible by 2. So I go over each element within the first list I define. And then I check within that, like, each counter will go through each element of the list. And it's going to do this modulo. Like, so if divisible by 2 or even is that modulo 2 equals 0, that's how you check it. And then if it meets that condition, then I want to put that element or append it into list number 2. So I want to put everything that meets this condition in list 1 to list number 2. And then here's another one. So I have a random list here. I have 2 lists, and what I want to do here is like I want to put positive numbers in list 2 and then negative numbers in list 3. So I define this list, go over the syntax, and then append like greater than 0 means like it's positive, and then everything else is negative. So these are the results. And then you could even reverse the list. Doing this, another way of doing it is, so you define your list of numbers, and then that's going to be the collection I put in here. And so that collection is going to reverse this. And then once I reverse that, technically it's already reversed. What I'm doing here is I'm using the loop to print it. And then once again, like, you could use a for loop to like create some geometric patterns. So how you do that is like, here is nested for loop. So I added some comments, hopefully it makes sense, but this reason why we're doing this is so it prints the spaces, this whole thing, and then this next for loop prints the pattern, the asterisk. And then I think that besides doing the asterisk, you could also print out numbers. So yeah, it just depends on what you're trying to do. But that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, let us know. But I should give you guys I should give you guys access to the Google Drive after class. Natalia, did you get your question answered about the nested
Yeah,
loop?
I think you put it in at the end of your slides. I think the last thing was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Kayla, so if you have other questions, you can stay until, up to 3. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so we're pretty much done. If you guys have other questions, just email us or just ask on Piazza. Yeah, I'll give that to you in a bit. Actually, I can do it right now. The Google Doc. Oh, okay. Yeah, just let me see. I'll send that to you, yeah, Elizabeth. Okay. All right, guys, we're gonna begin in a bit. Here's this week's coding lab. Just let me know if you need access. All right, Kayla, I gave you access. Cool. Let me be back in like 5 minutes. All right, guys, we'll begin in like 2 minutes. Okay, all right, guys, so we'll begin now. We'll just see if there's not much for you guys, but all right, welcome to week 2. This is COGS 18 Coding Lab 2. Hope you guys are enjoying your Python coding. It's now it's getting a little bit like complicated, maybe not, but today we'll just be talking about if, the coding collections. I don't know if you guys have access or if you guys go to the Monday coding lab, but like Sylvia, she had talked about like variables and all the other stuff. But today we'll only be talking about collections, while loops, and for loops. If you guys do have questions on other things like assignments, please let me know. What's gonna happen today is so if you remember, I told you there's gonna be Taylor and I for the TA. He's not able to, I don't know if it's just today, but he's not able to make it to the second hour. So what we'll do is while I'm talking, just PM me on the chat. I'll try to verbally answer your question. But breakout rooms, I don't think we can do that. I'll just do it after if I have time. And if we don't have time, just you can definitely email me. But okay, so here's just office hours. I know some of you guys did go to my office hours, so that's good. I have it on Wednesdays, right about a few hours after this. I figured that if you guys need more help, or you don't have an opportunity to ask your question now, you can just pop in there. It's a different link, so make sure you go there on Canvas. But what we're gonna start out with is some logistics first. So there's FAQs. I would just say like if you guys look at Piazza and there's some questions that's already been answered there, just look up some of the why that was done before like asking me in an email. You can certainly go there first. I think it's been streamlined. It's really good, like platform to ask your question. And then some of the some of the due dates here. So your coding lab 2 is due tonight before midnight. Your assignment 2 is due on Monday before midnight. And then your first exam is going to be administered next week, Monday as well. So hopefully we can answer most of your questions before then. I know there's going to be a practice exam, so try to get that done. And shouldn't be that hard. One advice I could say is like, just try to do as many of the problems, maybe like the assignments, and then there are going to be questions on like explaining the logical process, or like why you're choosing to do like a data type, something like that. So it's not just like coding, it's also like explaining yourself or why you did something and then the process of doing that. And another thing is be careful about wording. So like when it says programmatically code, don't just hard code it, make sure you actually perform the steps. So yeah, ask so many questions if you want before the exam. It's always good. But okay, let's start out with going over what you're gonna do for coding lab. Oh shoot. Okay, so for coding lab 2, I'm just gonna go over what the parts are. So variables, and you did like operators and comparisons. I did talk about this a little bit last week. And asserts, this was covered in class. I think maybe Sylvia, the OTA, talked about it. But what this is just, when you assert something and then this is supposed to be true, then nothing pops out. But if you assert it and it's not true, then you're gonna get an error. So a couple of things about these coding labs. We're gonna have some challenge questions for you guys. So I know I did say that like for example here, so conditional challenges. So I did say that we're not gonna grade it like, fully. These challenge, and that is still true. We're just gonna like look at your coding labs and see if you made an effort to answering each question. And if you didn't, like make sure you try your best, or like if you don't know something, just comment, put like hashtag and comment something or what you would do. And so that like we know at least you tried, but never leave anything blank. And then so part 4, collections and indexing, and then conditionals. And then the loops. Probably the hardest thing that I want you guys to grasp is what are loops. Like there's 2 types in Python. There's for and while loops. I'll explain this really descriptively, but like focus most of your effort on how the logical process of a loop is. Oh, so yeah, I'll talk about this in a bit, but this last part is something you want to pay attention to, the infinite loops. All right, so let's begin. So for coding lab 2, what we're gonna focus on mostly is how to create like an array. And if you guys seen an array, like different types of, like, it's just a way to group things. Like you have a grouping of like numbers or grouping of strings, words, and then you've learned the data types before, the non-type, Boolean, float, integer, and then the strings. You can put all of those are called objects inside a collection. So when you were working with collections, I just put a few of these in words, and I'll show you guys how to code it, because it's always good to know what they are and when not to use one over the other. But like there are 4 types of collections in Python. There's like, the first one is a list. So what is a list? It's just a collection of objects that's defined in a bracket. So always remember how you define these. So anything, you define these with a bracket, and then the other ones differently. Okay, Purana, I'll give you access after the lab. And then so when you would use a list is like when you want to modify that that array, and then also you can duplicate objects within that array. And what that means is like for example, you want to have like 2 1s or 2 of the same strings. Like apple, you could duplicate those objects in an array, in a list. And then you can also see, I'll define this clearly in a bit, but you can index a list. And then what this means is, so a list is an unsorted object. And what that means like, if you define like 2 1 3, and then whatever it outputs is just 2 1 3, it doesn't sort it automatically. It doesn't do like 1 2 3. So that's unsorted. It doesn't sort it for you. And it's why you would use that is if it's best to use a list if you're editing the collection. All right. And a tuple is like the second most common one, is like you define a tuple if you're doing like parentheses, instead of a bracket. That's a tuple. Always remember that. And when to use a tuple is if you don't want that collection to be modified. And then you also can duplicate objects there. And then you could also index. And everything you have there will retain its order. It doesn't order it. When to use a tuple over a list? Well, when you're defining these objects, what ends up happening is it stores memory in like Python. So if an object gets modified, what ends up happening is it actually has more memory in it. So if you want to run your code like efficiently, you want to use a tuple because it retains its collection. It doesn't get modified. And here's a third one. I don't think this was covered in class, but like a set. So a set is it's kind of like a list and a tuple, but you're using curly braces. So for this, when do you use it? When you want your list to be modified, but you don't want duplicate objects, and you also don't want it to be indexed. But here, for a set, if you want something to order itself or sort itself, like this is the time that you would use it. So like 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, it does it for you. Later on, I'll talk about how you can actually manually sort your collection. And then when is this used is if you're editing your collection, and then if efficiency is an issue. So for the most part, you're just gonna be using a list. Like I'm just letting you guys know that there's a couple other ones. And then the fourth one is a dictionary. So a dictionary, you also define that with curly braces, and then it can be modified. You don't want duplicate objects in there. It can also be indexed, and then it sorts itself. And it's used best if you're editing, if you want efficiency, and then if you need the ability to index. The reason why is you're gonna see that there's like a dictionary is kind of special because you have this different syntax of defining it. So there's that certain aspect of when you want to use a dictionary. And then the way you define these collections, like how you index them. I mean, if you've worked with like different codes before, typically you use 1. Like the first like element in the collection is going to be 1, which makes sense. But like in Python, you have to remember like the first element is always 0. So that always throws everyone off. Is like when you're editing the list, you always start with 0 and 1, 2, 3. So just remember that. And then here's the syntax. It's better if I just go over the examples for you. So first of all, what are the different things that you can define as a list? You can define a bunch of integers. So like this. So here's a bunch of integers, and then you just print it. And then the next one is like floats. So I mean, like I won't go over each individual line, but you can tell already. Oh yeah, one thing that maybe is important is how do you know what you define is actually a list? So first of all, define it, and then just put in type. You guys know like this command probably in class is if you just put in type and then what is that variable? And then so that's how you know something is a list. And then what if you wanted, and then what if you want to define like different things? So as I said, you have 5 data types. You could put whatever object you want in a list. It's up to you. But like, so it's free range of how you want to define your list. This is going to be the most common. And then also you could use a tuple. Tuple is kind of similar to a list. And in the same way, you can also check if it is a tuple. So you define it with parentheses. And then you put type, what is that? So here you go, it is a tuple indeed. And then here's a dictionary. So like I said, a dictionary is like a special case, a special type of collection. So, so you have this dictionary, right? And then you define it with curly braces. And what you want to remember here is what goes inside, because it's not like a set or a tuple. What you have here is you have this colon. This is what you want to remember is what goes on the left of the colon is a key. And then what goes on the right is the value. And so yeah, just remember what that is. And then how you index it is kind of different as well from like a list. But yeah, that's how you define it. And then, so these couple ones, I'll try to do my best to go over them quickly, but because this is a long one. But I'm just gonna talk about the different ways you can modify a collection, but primarily for a list. Because for example, if you're gonna use, for the most part, you're gonna be just using a list in your codes, but there are certain times that you'll use other ones, but what you apply for a list works with all the other collections. So this first one is, I wanna figure out what is the length of my list. So you define your list here of fruits, and then you wanna just put in like the length. So that's the length of your list. And then, so let's count how many A's inside. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you run this, you're gonna get 6. So that's good. Why you do this, I think I covered it last time, is like, you could use this number to know how to index your list, or you could also use this to like maybe compare two lists, like, the length of them. And then, so one of the first ones of how to modify a list is using elementing. So when you do, and when you wanna use a list, you can actually like access the different, here, for example, you want to using the number, the index number inside the list, you can access aspects of it, like different elements inside. But what you want to remember is that index number starting at 0. So like, so for example, I want the first element here, right? So how you would do that is you have this list variable, and then you have like brackets after the list variable. And then what you define inside is your index number. So that's called elementing, because then you need to define that with an index number, and then whatever you define is the index number of your element that you want to output. So for this one, you want to have the first element of the list. So you put 0 and you're going to get apple. And yeah, you could play around with this. One thing or two things I want to show you guys is, what if you wanted to, what if your list is long, like super long, not just short, and then you wanted to get the last element, and you don't want to know the length of it. That's one way of doing it. Another way would be just putting negative, like, -1. So you go all the way to the end of the list, and then you want the last one, which is 1. And it just gives you that last one. So, and then why you wanted to know like the length of your list is like, for example, you have this like list. We knew beforehand that it was 6 elements long. So if I put something, longer than 6 or larger than 6, you're gonna get this index error. And then another way is like slicing. So when you slice a list, what that means is just, I wanna access like a certain portion of the list, not the full list that I define. One way I would do that is I guess like two different things, or how you define a list variable first is, if you have like, like this first number is where you begin, and the second number in between the colons is where you want to end, and then this third number is your step. So how you want to, like, for example, you want to do every second one or every one, you put 1 or 2. So how, I can't explain everything here, but the best thing I can say is like try to experiment, like putting different numbers here and seeing what it actually does, and then and then you can figure it out. But like this one is, if I don't put a number, that means what you're actually slicing is you go from all the way to the beginning and then all the way to the end, and then the step is defined, which means like every one, but it's negative. So what this is doing is it's doing it in the reverse order, as you can see here. So yeah, like there's different ways of doing that. This is just one way of reversing your list. Another way would be, maybe I want to start with every item. So I don't define a step, so it's default like every item. But I want to start from second to the last element. So I would just do like 1 because that's the second element. And then I don't define a number because then it goes all the way to the end, and then it's every one since I didn't define a step. And I mean, you could do this too. You could go every third item. So you go from mango, 1, 2, 3, and I don't define like where it ends. So it goes all the way, it applies that, but I define this in the step. So it's every third. So there's different ways you could do that, but this is kind of like one of the important ones. And then you could also use appending. What this is, you can, I guess, so you guys have learned about functions or commands. And then there's other things in Python where you have this dot and then another command. This is what you call a method. And it's not just this, but there's different ones that you can do. But like when you do this appending, what we're trying to do here is we want to add another object or another element to a list. So I want to add strawberry to this list. So what you would do is that you have that list variable, and then you put dot append, and then whatever you want to add. And it just adds it to the end. And then you can also do like membership. So this is just checking, oh, do I have, a certain element inside my list? So I want to check, is cherry inside this list? So I put in, and it does, oh, it's false. And then this one is checking, okay, is cherry not in? You guys learned this is membership operators. So all those things you can check also. Now not just with a variable, but you can use it with a collection. And then sometimes this can get interchanged. So there's what you call elementing and then indexing. And just to clarify what those are. So I talked about elementing, and now it's indexing. And if you remember, when you're doing elementing, you're accessing a certain aspect or a certain part of your list using like the index number. But sometimes, it can get confusing, like how you bookmark each number. So the best part, I think I like to default to indexing sometimes because then it's easier to see. But it's just a switch of it. What I want to know is, okay, knowing the actual element, what is the index number? So this is what you do, like you do list and then dot index, and you want to figure out what index number is banana in. So you just do that, and it just tells you it's number 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. And then you could also replace something inside a list. Yeah, Yumintong, give me after the lab. I can answer that question for you. Just show me your screen after. All right, so replacing is, so what you do here is you want to update a list, but you want to replace like one element of it. So what you do is use this like this elementing thing, and then so you want to replace 0, 1, 2, 3 here, the banana with strawberry. So you just do this. So now this is banana, and then you want to make this equals another thing, and that's it. You just make it equal something else, and then you print it, and then that's what you get. And then now, as I said, like you could manually sort your list, and how you do that is just doing this. Like you have this list, and then dot sort, and that's all you do. So you define this, and you want this to be in ascending order. So that's good. And then in this next one, you can actually reverse that order if you wanted to just have it in a descending order. And it's just a combo. You can, you define your list, you put sort, and then you dot reverse. So like I said, you could do, you could modify lists in many ways. Like for example, like we did the reverse like this before, but then you can also do dot reverse. It will give you the same thing. But this is for numbers only. And then you can also insert something, like inside, like in between two elements. What you do here is you do list dot insert, and then from here you put in where you want to insert it and what you want to insert. And then you could also extend. What this does is it's just a way to combine two different lists. So, you have this first list, and then you extend, and then you put in whatever you want to put after that list, and then just combines it. There's many uses for these. So like, it's good to like, for example, this next few, now we want to remove a few things from the list. So if you want to remove something, but then you know the index number, you just do that list variable and then dot pop, and then whatever index number you want to remove. And then you just remove banana. Yep, 0, 1, 2, 3. And then you can also remove by elements. So, you know, not knowing the number, you could just look at your list and see what you want to remove. So you put list dot remove and then whatever you want to remove. And then you could also delete. So from here, you know, you put del, and then you put the list variable, and then the same way how you element is you put this, and then this will remove, kind of similar to what we did with pop. And then you can also clear out your whole list. Sometimes you wonder like why you want to do that. So when you're doing like a loop later on, sometimes you could use clear to like check. You want to put a few things inside another like list, but you want to clear it first. So it's like a different way of like passing different elements from list to list. So how you do that is like you list and then dot clear. And then for you guys that like math, you could actually look at a way of like making a matrix. You know, I mean, this is one way you could do it. How you define that is, so you have, it's kind of like nesting a list within a list. So you have a list of like numbers, and then within a list of lists, then you create like a matrix. And then if you wanted to access like the first row, you just do this, you know, kind of like how you element it. And then if you want to access, like if you know the, like just a number, like you know the column and the row. So the row is the first here, and then the column is here. So remember, it's 0. That's one thing that throws me off. So that's how you do it. So now let's talk about the loops. So for a while loop, that's your first one that you're going to encounter. When you use it is it's just it repeats the code that you have in the while loop for when it's true until it's false. So just to make that clear, I just got a flow chart here. So you go to the while loop, right? And then it says, is the condition true? If the condition you have in the while loop is true, then it executes the body of the loop until this question becomes false. So that's what you do. You have this counter, and then you have this while condition. And then one thing to remember is when you're doing while loops, and then you're also doing, I mean, I think all the other commands, but like, always remember to put in this colon. And then after that is everything within your code. Let's talk about the examples. So different ways you could use a while loop is you can have it like list a different, like the same way as like a collection. You can have different numbers, strings, whatever, but you want to print it without the brackets or the parentheses. Is so 3 elements that you want to remember when you're defining a while loop is you need to define a counter first. And this is how you initialize the loop, is you initialize the counter. And the counter is just what you're gonna check if it's true. And then that's how you know it, that's how it flags the code to repeat it. And then what you wanna do is increase that counter. And then it recycles your while loop. And then once it becomes false, it's too large of a number or too little, then it will exit. So like, for example, here, you start with 1, and then you go here first time. So it's 1, and then you check this comparison. So it's true. And then you run your body. So it prints 1. And then you increase that count. So now you're back to the beginning. So now it's 2. It's still less than 5. So 2, it prints, so on and so forth until it becomes 6. 6, it doesn't, it exits, and then, so that's why you only go from 1 to 5. And then, so the next one, same thing, you do it in a reverse fashion. And then this next one is, so you're gonna see this a lot in your assignment. And then one of the ways that you could do with a while loop is add a range of numbers. And how you could do that is, you could do different counters. You can have like this sum counter as 0, and then your initial number you start at 1, but you wanna end with 10. And then the one thing with these loops, like when you're trying to define these variables, try to be as descriptive as possible, because you could get like confused with like how your counter, how you're increasing that counter, or what's going inside a variable inside the loop. So try to make sure you distinguish them or add a comment. So what's happening here is like you're adding, right, numbers from 1 to 10. So 1 plus 2, 3, 3 plus 3, 6, 6 plus 4, yeah. And then, so that's what's happening here. This is, see, like when you're doing these loops, the best thing I could say is like, try to test them first with like a small number, because you don't want to be stuck with like a really large number and figuring out like what happened. And so with a small number, maybe 1 to 5, see if the results make sense, and then modify the syntax here until you get something that you want, and then increase the number, and so that should repeat it. And then now let's implement continue. What is continue? And then conditionals in a while loop. So like what you want to do here is this continue. What's happening is it actually skips a number. Like it's usually a combo with like an if statement. So like you start with 10, right? And then you minus 2 every time. And then once you reach this condition, like 2, it goes to this, this if statement body. It says continue. So what's happening? So once you reach 2, it skips it. So it goes to the next counter, which is like 0 minus 2. So a way I can say is that continue is just skipping the counter. And break is kind of similar. This is exactly the same, but like if you do break with a if statement, it will break it. So it will like stop and exit out of the loop. So it won't go to the next counter. It'll just, once you reach that statement where your counter is that number, then you'll exit. You won't print anything, or you won't go here. So yeah, just play around with it. But those are the two things. You could do continue and breaks in loops. And then you could also do a Boolean statement here instead of like a comparison. What's happening is like we said, like you run the while loop when you have a true condition. So you're not really comparing anything. It'll just continue running this, and continue increasing this counter. But what I've done here is once it reaches 7, you could get out of the loop, and that's how you do it. You don't need a condition here. And then this next one, kind of similar to how you do if statements, you guys done that, is you could actually do a while else. So kind of like if else, you do a while else. So a while else is, so you know how to do a while loop now. So you have this 3, right? It runs it regularly, but once you reach like 1, it won't just end. You can do a secondary command. So that's what you do here. Once this is false, like you run 3 to 1, it's true. Once it's false, it goes to else and runs this next one. And then you could also repeat your string, like different things. You can concatenate whatever you've learned so far. You can put inside loops. You're gonna learn later on is a way you can create like a chatbot. Or maybe you already touched on it a little bit. But a chatbot is just like you arrange, you type something, and then the computer tells you, oh, this is wrong, or this is right, or hello, blah, blah, blah. So you can actually program that chatbot depending on the response of the human. And this is a way you could do that. You could do loops or while loops to give you different statements. And then you can also do membership. So like, for example, this one, what I've done here is, so I have this list, right? And then I want to run this list if cat is inside. So cat is inside here. Now I'm removing it. So then it prints it, because there's 2 here and the second one. And then it comes back, and then I think it only runs twice. Yeah, and then it just prints this. So one way I forgot to mention is if you want to debug your code, is you want to align your statements. Like for example, if you have a print statement, and and you want to check like what's happening each time the loop is running. I usually like have it aligned inside like this. So now I'm seeing what's happening each time. But if you put it like at the end here, you just have the end result. So yeah, you're gonna get different like print outputs if you do that. So try to play around with that. And then, so here's another way where it empties the list each time. So how I'm doing that, this is just one way of doing it, is like pop -1. So I'm emptying it from the right. So that's why it's -1 here. Okay, and then another way, you guys will see this in your challenges, is like you can actually nest while loops. So once you do that, you can actually create different geometric shapes. And yeah, I am giving you guys this notebook, so refer back to this if you need to know what syntax to use. So what you could do is like, just follow this. It's kind of, I mean, you can make sense out of it. And this is not the only way of doing that. But this, you can create this with a while loop and a for loop. And so let's see. So remember I asked, this is kind of like a chatbot in a sense, but you could use a while loop with an input command. So how you do that, so, you know, I mean, you just do like a bunch of if-else statements and an input inside like a while loop. So, you know, you answer this. And it just keeps on doing that until like you're done. And now let's talk about for loops. Like, for loops are very similar. The one thing that's different is like it repeats the body of the code of a for loop, knowing the length of your sequence or your collection or your like array. So you have much more control of this. And you know, like with a while loop, you're gonna see that like if you run it many, if you're gonna run into this many times is when you're gonna do like an infinite loop. I forgot to talk about that, but in the while loop, if you do encounter an infinite loop, the one thing that you know that's happening is once you run your while loop and you look over here and it's taking more than 2 seconds at least to run, and then you see an asterisk, and you know for a fact something's going on. Like don't try to continue. What you should do is like you go here and then interrupt. And then try to debug or edit your code, your while loop, see what's happening before you run it. But yeah, kernel interrupt. That's like the best way, kernel interrupt. And then like, so for for loops, the reason why I like for loops better is you don't encounter infinite loops because you're in perfect control of how many times you're running it. But so here's just a flow chart. So, you know, you have the for loop, you enter the condition first, and then it's gonna ask you, is this the last item in that sequence or array? And if it's not, it's false. It'll run it and continuously run it until it becomes true. So with a while loop, it runs it until when it's true, until it becomes false. For a for loop, it runs it when it's false until it becomes true. And then you can control the amount of times you run the for loop. But a while loop, you can't. So let's talk about the different like ways that you can use a for loop. So kind of similar to a while loop. Oh yeah, this is something new maybe, but like when you define like the counter, it's inside your condition now. It's not outside your for loop. So here you have the same counter, and then this is the syntax of for, and then counter, and then in, and it's checking the sequence. You know, this can be any collection. It could be a collection of like a number, a range, or a collection of like a list or strings, whatever. But what's happening here is like I'm using this list and I'm putting each individual sequence inside counter, and then it's printing each one every time. But okay, so what for this range first though, you're gonna use this a lot for the for loops. How you define a range is just a sequence of numbers. Is this first number is where you want to begin, and then the second number is where you want to end, and then this last third number is the step. So it's kind of like how we did the indexing. It's very similar. And so another thing is, what if I don't want to do print this vertically but horizontally? This is a way to do it. And then, you know, not only with numbers, but with strings, you could do this. So if you want to like experiment with range, it's like a way to really, you know, print something as many times as you want. Like just put range 5, 10, whatever, and it prints it runs this as many times as you want. And then this is the syntax for everything if you want to do it horizontally. And then so with a range, a couple of things that you could do, you could also index a range. You know, you have this range that goes from like 0 to 4, and then you want to access like the first element. So that, and then you want to access the fourth element. You just do that. Kind of similar to what we talked about. And then this is another way of defining a list of numbers. You put list comboed with range, and this is also a way to combine like concatenation. We talked about this before, but then now we're using a for loop. Is you just do this, you know, and then if you wanted to define like the columns, you could do this, and you know, when there's different ways of doing this, but this is one. And then you can also combine like a for loop with conditionals. So everything you've learned so far, you could put inside loops. And then that's always a great way when to use it is like when you know you're trying to print something many times and there's a pattern, then you know you need a loop. And then so you're gonna see this a lot is that we're gonna have you guys like add or like create lists depending on a condition. So here's one way with a for loop is I wanna add like a number or between a range of number from 11 to 29 or a sum of those numbers. So you define the counter first, and then you define this range from 12 to 29. And then you want to go with like every 2. And you want to get the sum of it, the sum plus the counter, and you print it. And then same with a while loop, you can do with a for loop. Is like you can do like, you know, this if statement would continue. So what happens here, it skips 6. And then, yeah. And then with break, you know, once you reach 6, it just exits out of the loop. Yeah, I'm giving you guys this demo. So if you guys have questions, you can always go back to it. So and this is the one I was talking to you guys about is like, you know, you could do a chat bot and then one way you could use a for loop is, everyone's experienced this, like logging on to like a web page is, and then you have like a password that asks you, or like if it's incorrect. So here I'm putting the right password, so that's good. But then, you know how like if you do it incorrectly and does that, and does it again, so that's a loop until you get the right one. So that's like one way you apply it. And besides numbers, you could also print like letters or like strings. And then, you know, you can modify it, like not printing everything. And then like print it horizontally. So yeah, just different ways of doing this. It's always good to repeat it so that like you can understand what's happening. And so you have this, you know, you could do everything pretty much like, you know, changing the cases of each one of these. So each one of these, I changed the first letter and then I just combined them. And then I could also like within the count, you could add numbers, you know, from your list. And with this, you're you know, within the list, you're skipping the number 8. You put continue. And then here's a couple ones that you may see in your assignment or lab. You're trying to multiply through a list. So like you define the list first of numbers. And then you define a second list. And then in these second lists, you want to use a for and then a combination with a command or maybe if-else statement. And then what's happening inside the loop is you're going to populate your second list only when those conditions gets met or satisfied. So like here, I have the full range 1 to 10. And now I want to multiply everything here by 2. I mean, yeah, this is one way, but there's another way. So you do this, you know, like to put the syntax for the condition. And then you just do this times 2. And this is what you get. And here's a more complicated one is, what if I add another list? And then in the second list, what I want to do is I want to only put numbers there that are even or divisible by 2. What you could do is like, you know, this typical condition. And then this is how you do it. So this if statement is checking if it's even or divisible by 2. You put the modulo of that counter of each element here of 2 is 0. So if it's 0, then that means it's even, or yeah. And so what you want to do now, so since that number it does satisfy this condition, is you want to append it to your second list. So you want to append the counter, each one of these from the first list to the second list because it meets this condition. And so that's everything that's even. And then the next one is like, what if I wanted to define like positive and negative numbers only? So here's another random list, and then you define 2 empty lists. And then another, you know, typical from list 1. And then from the list 1, you want to check each counter, each element. Is it greater than 0? This is checking if it's positive. So once it meets that, then I want to append it to list 2. Or else it's negative, so then append it to list 3. So yeah, this is list 2, and then this is list 3. And then you could do as many things as you want to these, like, but then like it's just different ways of like modifying your lists and then using for loops, while loops, and conditionals. And then this is another way of like printing a reverse list. So you have a list, and then you're not using range anymore. You're using like, you can define this collection as, what you did before. Like you can have it as a modified list and print it in reverse. And then the same way as what you did with a while loop, you could have, you could print very nice, like attractive geometric shapes. Is like, the syntax here, I can explain it, but I think some of these might be in your homework, but this is the syntax for it. It might not be the shape, but here's a way to do it. So try to experiment on like, how you want to print your spaces and then where you want to print your patterns. It's just a different combo. And then besides like asterisk, you could also use numbers. All right, I think that's pretty much it. If you guys have other questions, you can let me know now. Okay. You wanna share your screen? It's fine. I guess yeah, just share your screen, and then I'll look at the chat. Let me stop sharing. Hold up. Go ahead. Jefferson, I'll give you access after lab. Here's the link again. Yumatal, can you show me your screen? Yeah, I think it would be good if you show me and then I'll answer the question. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's weird. Hold up, let me just change that. Oh, that's weird. That's not the one.
Song is working.
Is it working now?
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. Can you share screen?
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Try it now. I allowed share screen. You should be able to do it.
Can you see my screen?
Try it again.
Please start browser.
I can't see anything yet.
Yeah, I need to. Oh my gosh. Oh, can you access the checkpoint, the lab too?
Yeah,
I just don't
I can.
understand what the question is asking.
Which one? Assert?
The check, the lab part 3 for assert.
Okay, I'll go onto it and share it.
It's not my code. It's just a question.
Okay. All right, let's see. Part 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what about this one?
So are we supposed to change the code?
Let's see. Declare a variable.
It's asking us to explore.
Yeah, explore. Right here. Assert explore or up here.
No, everything above, like it says assert, like type Boolean, like are we supposed to just try it or should we change it?
Yeah, you wanna like here it says declare a variable Boolean that has type Boolean. You wanna do what this is saying and that passes to assert in the next cell. So this don't change this, but then like this Boolean has to be like maybe true or something, you know, like false. Does it make sense? Or
Oh, sorry, I didn't get
yeah.
it.
So like it says declare a variable called Boolean. So this is your variable,
Yeah.
and then you
Oh,
wanna make it true or false, yeah. Here, let me just try this. Boolean, right, equals true. So you're good. That's good.
oh, I see. Okay,
Like that.
thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing I was confused about.
Okay. So you have another one?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, guys. If you have other questions, sorry for taking so much time, but the I'll have another session at 6. It's gonna be just go on Canvas. Some of you guys do go to my office hours, but you can either email me or you go to Piazza or come to my office hours for other questions. But yeah, thank you.
Wait. Are you still here?
All right. What?
Okay, sorry. So on my computer for part 3 asserts, like for example, the second one, check that there is a variable called Boolean that is a Boolean. I can't edit it. Am I
You can't edit it?
where should I edit? Oh, wait, what? Okay, I think I got it.
Okay. Yeah, just try it.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll just work with it.
This one right here is weird. Like this bool, this might be why. But this is the variable you want to define.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Have a nice day.
You too. Hi guys, thanks.